What you're about to see are the first couple of seconds of the awesome movie we're gonna create today.
A great Egyptian pharaoh summons his two young nephews, Chuma and Azur, and commissions them to a monumental task.
Build 2 massive pyramids as a tribute to Egypt. Upon completion, I promise you kingship and riches for your remaining days.
So why would you create a movie? Well, how valuable is a movie? That's the question, right? If you look on Wikipedia, for example, you can see that the highest grossing movie ever earned $2.6 billion. That's a lot of money. How many houses is that worth? A movie is just a string of images, right? You can't grab a movie, you can't hold it in your hands, you can't destroy it. But some of them are more valuable than farmland. Their single tweets worth more than your entire net worth. Images are worth more than the amount of money earned by every single person you know. Content is valuable. There's no questioning that some content is worth millions and millions of dollars. You can see it all around you. Content creation is wealth creation. And that's the reason why you should make movies. And it's never been easier with AI. So the idea of this video is to give you a tool belt on how to create movies with AI. I might use certain tools that might not be preferable to you, or there's a newer tool that exists at the time you're watching. So might as well use that tool instead of the tool I'm going to show you. That being said, there are 6 distinct steps in order for us to create any movie we want. Let's start with the first step. We need to create a story. Of course, the very basic of any movie is that you have to have a story. And if you want to have a great movie, you need to have a great story. So there are different ways you can do this. So either you take an existing story or you create your own. There are certain tools online which can create you movie scripts, any story you want, or you could also just use something like ChatGPT in order for you to generate a story. In order to make this process easier for you, I created a simple PDF with some prompts you can easily use in order to create your story with ChatGPT. So there's a chapter called storytelling, and it gives you the basics first here, and then afterwards it gives you the prompt you can use. So you can simply copy all of this, scroll down, it's quite long up to here, and then you can write in a basic explanation of what you want your story be like. For example, a pharaoh summons 2 young men to build a pyramid, and upon completion of the pyramid, the person will get rewarded in great amounts of gold, for example. You can simply write this in a couple of sentences. That should be enough, because you let then ChatGPT do all the work for you. I will say that copying this is one thing, but I would also advise you to just read at least once through this, because it gives some great explanations about storytelling in general, which might be quite helpful for you. So I will give you just a short explanation about storytelling. Usually it follows a specific pattern, and this is called the hero's journey. And this is basically the main character here of the story receives a call to adventure, or like something disastrous happens in his or her life, and this could be also called the call to adventure. And then he or she departs from the ordinary world, and then they go through trials and errors to achieve something or to relieve pain or whatever it is. And through that journey they will meet mentors or allies and so on. And just at the point where everything seems like nothing is working according to plan and everything seems like it's lost, at that point the hero succeeds, and then the hero returns home with his newfound knowledge or newly found experience, possessions, friends, whatever it is. So that's basically how usually a story is set up. If you think about it, and even if you watch movies or read books, you will always see some kind of story like this, following this pattern. So this is what also your story should be following. So as I said, you should read through this at least once, and then just copy and paste this into ChatGPT. Give it a basic explanation here of what your story should look like. Again, it could be just a couple of sentences, and then you let ChatGPT do all the work. In my case, I already have a story, and I didn't actually use ChatGPT for this because there's a story I remembered from the book The Millionaire Fastlane, which was quite nice, and I just decided to take that story instead and create a movie out of it. And just to give you an overview of my story, this is basically the story. It's not that long. You can pause this video and just read through it so that you get what the story is all about. Then, after you have your story, you can optionally convert the story into a movie script so that the following steps will be easier. So for that, I also wrote up a prompt which you can use. So you simply copy and paste this into ChatGPT, and then at the end, you simply paste in your story. You just write, and this is my story, colon, and then just paste in your story, and it will give you your story as a movie script. Why might this be helpful, you might ask? Because in a movie script, usually you have script terms like EXT, which stands for external. For example, if a scene is shot outside instead of inside a room or whatever, then it makes it easier to imagine what the scene will look like, and this will also make the steps later on easier once we generate the images for that. And to make this also easier for you to get a grasp of some specific movie script terms, at the very bottom of the PDF you will find some resources, and in here you will find a link for a glossary of filmmaking terms. And on this website you will see all kinds of terms sorted alphabetically, and if you press, for example, on E, you will find this term I mentioned, EXT, which stands for exterior. This scene takes place out of doors. Now that we have our story, we can go on to the next step, which is to create images. And for that, you could use any kind of AI tool like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Focus, Leonardo AI, whatever fits best for you. I'm gonna use Midjourney in this case, but most of the things I'm about to explain is relatively the same. So back to our story, you will already have noticed that I divided the story up into different paragraphs. Usually I divide this up into different paragraphs so that I can more easily see where I have one image and the next image and the next image and so on. This is not exact because sometimes, for example, for this I use multiple images, but this one is, for example, one image, this is one image, and this is one image, and so on. But this breakdown will help you a lot because then you can more easily create the images you need. And as a general guideline, usually you shouldn't have a couple of sentences at most with just one image. So you shouldn't have like 20 sentences and then just showing one image, because that will get boring and the viewer will just do something else instead. You will see here, for example, that these are 3 paragraphs. So I have one image showing Chuma with his twisted apparatus. Then I have another image where Asia is talking, and then another image where Chuma is talking. So let's start with the first image. In this case, since the story is based in ancient Egypt, every time I'm gonna write a prompt, I'm gonna use the terms in ancient Egypt so that Midjourney always keeps this consistent. So whatever theme you have in your story, you should write this in every single prompt, because like Midjourney, for example, doesn't remember the context of the previous prompts, so you will have to write it every time. So in this case, the first image would be a great Egyptian pharaoh summons his 2 young nephews, Chuma and Azur, and then tells them his task. My first prompt was, in this case, in ancient Egypt, a great pharaoh summons 2 young men, and then I use specific terms I like to use with Midjourney, for example, cinematic, photorealistic, and so on. And I use the aspect ratio of 16:9 because it's a movie, but of course you could also just do it the reverse if you want to do shorts, for example, 9:16. Or if you leave the aspect ratio out, of course, as you know, each image will be squared. So in this case, it gave me this result, but I didn't really like that. So I gave it a different prompt. In ancient Egypt, a great pharaoh sitting in a palace full of gold on a majestic throne. And then full body, because this helps, instead of seeing just the face here, helps see most of the time the full body of the person. And then again, my different parameters I like Midjourney to also use. And this gave me better results, and I picked this one. So I simply pressed on U2, and then I zoomed out of it and chose this one. I downloaded this one and then zoomed out again of this. I chose this one. And if you want to change something in the image, which you don't like, you can press on this button here, vary region. In this case, I selected this part here and simply wrote waving hand away, so that it seems like a gesture that he's waving his nephews away after he told them his task. And then it gave me this, which was pretty nice, but the problem was that there was like a second hand, so you have to regenerate that. Sometimes you just have to play around. You don't always get the best results at the first try, but that's okay. So since we have only one person here, but we also want to show the nephews, I also did a prompt in order to generate two young men. For this, I simply wrote, in ancient Egypt, a young athletic man standing in a palace full of gold, and again full body, and my different parameters. And as you can see, it gave me these results, which I didn't quite like, so I regenerated it. And again, you have to play around, but I liked this one and this one. The problem with this one later on was that he was not facing the camera from the front, so from the side it's a bit difficult to use a tool we're going to use later on called face swap. But I like this one at the bottom, so I chose that one and zoomed out of it, and then I used this and upscaled it so that I can later easily zoom in without losing quality. So later on I again used this prompt to create another person, as I said, because the other person was not facing the camera from the front. So in that case it gave me these results, and I went for this one. Again, I upscaled and zoomed out of it, and again I zoomed out of it and upscaled it. Then, because we're going to use these characters multiple times and the scenery in the background might be different, in that case we can just use the character and then remove the background so that we can easily change between backgrounds. For that you can use whatever tool you want to use, like Photoshop or Canva, or if you want to use a free tool, you can go to this website. You can also find this in the PDF in the resources chapter, but then usually you upload here your image, and I choose this as an example. So it's going to remove all this background here and have this hawk in the front, and as you can see it will give you this. You can erase or restore when you didn't like something. So to restore here something in the window, or to erase even more, you could erase this part here, and afterwards you can press on download here. The problem with this is the resolution is not that nice. That's why we use another tool in this case, which is an AI image upscaler. You can find it under upscale.media, and then upload your image here, and then you can choose upscale to 2x or 4x and then enhance quality. And as you can see, it looks already on the right here better. So you download that image, and then you're about the same quality of the image you originally had here from Midjourney, and you just have the person without any background. So as an example, this is Asher with the background, and this is Asher without the background. Coming back to the PDF I created for this video. By the way, you can download this completely for free, of course. You can find the link down below in the description box. One thing that I also made for you, you can use this if you want to. You could basically use ChatGPT to help you generate the prompts for Midjourney. For this, again, you can just simply copy this whole prompt here. It's quite long because it gives quite a few examples for Midjourney. You copy it down to this part here, and then you put in the story part. And don't forget, for each story you have to put in the context, so the theme of your story. So for example, if it's an ancient Egypt, you would write, of course, remember this is an ancient Egypt, colon, and then the part of your story. After you've done the first part of your story, you can simply put in the second part of your story, and GPT will give you different options you can use for Midjourney prompts. You can either use this or you do it manually yourself. Sometimes it's better to do it manually because you will have the most control of the output, but having GPT generate you some prompts can be quite helpful. One thing you should definitely pay attention to with your movie is that you have consistency in it. So when you generate images and you want to have a certain character in a different background, for example, in a different pose, it's hard to get exactly the same person again. That's why we use this remove background tool and the upscale tool, because now we can use a little trick we can use with Midjourney. It's very simple. You click on here, plus, and then upload file. You choose the file, and for example, our character with the transparent background, and then the file will appear here, and you just press enter, and basically you send this as a message, and then you press on the character or the photo, you do a right click, and then copy image address. And then you can use this link, you paste it in. First it will appear pretty long, so let me show you how this usually looks. So you write your imagine prompt, and at the first thing you paste in the link. After you've written your prompt, for example, in ancient Egypt, a young athletic man, blah blah blah, and you press enter, Discord will automatically shorten your link to this. So that's why you can see it here, not this long link here. And you just continue as usual with your prompt, and then it will use whatever image you give it as inspiration for the images it's gonna create. So this can be quite helpful to create consistently looking like characters. And you can also use this thing, for example, if you want to have something specific that you somehow cannot generate with Midjourney because Midjourney doesn't quite get it. You can simply go on Google, search for an image that you want it to look like a bit. I will show you this later on. And then you just upload the image, send it, and then copy the link and use the link, and then describe briefly what you can see in the linked image, write the remainder of your prompt, and it will use your image as inspiration. This can be really useful. If you're using a specific image quite often, what I would recommend you to do is just upload this image into a separate channel on your Discord, for example on this channel here, and then you can easily go on this channel and find this character more easily again, and just to copy the link. Because sometimes when you generate so many images, it's quite cumbersome to always scroll up to find the link of the character or the image you want Midjourney to use for inspiration. So for example, in the next part of the story, I want this character to drag stones in the sand. So if you go back to the story, you can see here, Asher gets to work immediately. He drags the heavy stones into a square formation and so on. So for that, I simply wrote, in ancient Egypt, remember the link to our image here, a young athletic man dragging stones in the sand into square formation. Full body again, cinematic, and so on. Now if you look at the images, we can get a similar looking character and having something done with stones, which is quite nice. In this case, for example, I forgot to write the aspect ratio, so that's why later on I do the same prompt again with a different aspect ratio, and you will just have to try out different stuff. But in my case, like for example, I want this guy to be dragging or pushing a stone, but in these images you can see he's doing none of that. That's why I simply went on Google, search for whatever you want the image to look like, man pushing stone, and you will find these images. You could even use this kind of image. It will still generate the kind of image you want to generate because this is just taken as inspiration from Midjourney. In my case, I found this image. You can even see, if you look closely, watermarks. Sometimes the resulting images of that will also have these small lines and so on. It's a bit annoying, but you can also get rid of them if you select them when you press on vary region. But as you can see, once I used my character, so as you can see, I can use multiple links for inspiration. So I have my character, this man pushing stones, and then just again the same prompt, in ancient Egypt, a young athletic man pushing a heavy stone. You will now see that we have a person who is looking like he's pushing a stone. In this case, I really like this one, so I went for that one. Then the next image would be townspeople cheer him on and commend his hard work. So we just have people in a small town in ancient Egypt, and I went for this one. One thing still for consistent characters, you will notice that even though we take an image as inspiration, the character still won't look like what we had originally. That's why we have a tool that is called Inside Face Swap. This is basically an app in Discord which you can easily install. So you go back to our PDF. Under the resources, you will find this link here. This is in order to invite the Inside Face app into your Discord server. You open this in your browser and you log into your Discord account, and then it will ask for permission so that Discord can add this bot to your server. And as you can see here, it's already on here, so it's easier to just do it in a different channel, so to keep things separated. And then the first thing you will do is do / save ID. Then you upload the image, which would be this image, of course, because this is the face that it's gonna replace whatever image we're gonna give, and you give it a name. For example, in my case, you can see I just named it Asher. Then it will just give you this message. Then you upload your image, simply click here, upload a file, and then upload the image. And then what you do is you right click on this, and then under apps, you simply press on InSwapper. And within seconds, it will give you an image with the replaced face. And it's not perfect all the time, but it gets pretty close, and this will give us some even better consistency for the characters. For example, another image I had was this one here, and after using the face swapper, you can see that it looks more closely to what our original character looked like. Sometimes you will have images with multiple faces on there. In that case, you can simply use a tool like Canva or even Preview on Mac to crop this part and then just upload this part to use face swapper with. So as you can see, I cropped just this part, then use the face swapper, and then just download the image I want to use. And then later in Canva, which is completely free in this case, put this image back together, and you will now have a consistent character. Now I will skip this part where I'm gonna show you how I did every image, because now I've shown you the most important tips and tools you can use. For example, this uploading an image on Discord and then using that link of the image for Midjourney to use as inspiration is very helpful. Otherwise, I just use these and then just changed a couple of things here and there, because, for example, Midjourney doesn't know the person's name. So in that case, you always replace this with the character description, for example, a young athletic man. And don't forget always to write your theme, for example, in ancient Egypt. But otherwise, this process remains the same for all the other images here. So in the end, I ended up with 15 images plus the 2-3 characters I have. These I usually order with the number, and then I just give it a brief name. And once we're done with that, we can go on to the next step, which is to animate images. Now for animating images, there are also different tools you can use. You can use Runway ML, you can use Leonardo AI. You can also use an app called Pixelmotion, which I will use quite heavily, and I will show you how to animate the images with that app. You can also use DID, which you can find under d-id.com. Basically, out of an image, you can create a video where the character talks whatever text you give it. In this case, I find this a bit problematic if you don't have a pro version of this, because the free version, you will have all these different watermarks on there and it's not really usable. Even if you pay a little bit, you will still have this watermark at the bottom on the left. That's why instead I went for HeyGen, which I'm going to show you now. So as you can see, currently we are on the home tab. So after you created a free account, you can go here to video avatar and then press on photo avatar and then just press on upload here. Now let me take this as example. So you press on open. This is gonna upload the image first. So it's gonna show us this now. So we press on here and then we just say create with AI Studio. Either we can go for landscape or portrait. In this case, it doesn't really matter because the whole image, as you've seen before, it's in portrait anyways. So when you press on portrait, it's gonna show you this video editor here. Notice that we are gonna see this watermark. So technically you could go back. Let's go back and let's go again on photo avatar, press on here, create with AI Studio, this time in landscape. So we could crop in our video editor just to this size and you wouldn't even see this watermark. Let's continue with this. Next, we will have to put in our text. I'll paste my text in here and then you press on here to select the voice. In this case, it's filtered for female, but we want male voice, so we filter for that. Then you can see the different voices here. You can play them to hear how they sound. And for example, if you have this icon, you can only use this voice if you subscribe to premium. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I will just go for the first voice here as an example. So press on that. And then the next thing, we can see that the text is this long. So you can see here the timing as on a normal video editor. And the timing takes about, let's say, 5 seconds. In that case, we have to drag back the character until the end of our audio file, and then we can press on submit, and then you press on submit, and then it's gonna generate our video with the voice animation. I'm gonna press on cancel here because I've already done that. If you go to AI Studio here, then you will see it here, and then you can have a look at how this will look like.
Chuma, why aren't you building your pyramid? The pharaoh might take this as disrespect and kill you.
And in the end, then you can simply download this in 720p. If you have premium, then of course you can download it in higher resolution. One thing for the pharaoh, I had a problem with when I uploaded the full image of the pharaoh. So when I uploaded this image, it couldn't recognize the face in here. So what I did, I just took a normal photo editor program. In this case, I could even just use preview on Mac and then just crop this part out and then use that instead. But you could also use Canva or whatever. So that's why you can see I have only this part of the image on there, and then it worked. Now I'm going to give you a walkthrough of the app Pixelmotion. In this case, I'm using it on my iPad, so technically I could also use my Apple Pencil with it. So it's a bit easier to draw, but you can also use it on your phone with your fingers. Doesn't really make that big of a difference. All right, so first of all, you would press on create new. Then you would have to choose an image. Then you could technically crop it somehow, but I want to keep it as is. So then you press on here, and then down here you have the following options. You can also swipe here, so you will have more options. Usually what I use the most is the animate and the overlay. So first, when you press on animate, you will get other options here: motion, geometry, pin, speed. And then when you scroll further here, you will also have more options. For example, mask and unmask. So the first thing I usually do is go to speed and set it as low as possible, because even at the lowest speed here, it's still a bit fast. For my taste, it could be slower, but that's the best we can get. Then you scroll further till you see the mask button. Then you press on it, and this progress bar means how big of a stroke you want to paint with. So to mask what items should not be affected by the animation. So this one is quite big. As you will see, I will leave it first like that. And as you can see, it's already pretty big. So when you go down to the very bottom here of the progress bar, it will be a lot smaller, but this helps to mask the biggest parts so you don't have to be drawing like this all the time, but rather like that. And you always have the options of undoing or redoing an action. And if, for example, you painted too much here, you can then press on unmask. Also, don't forget to dial down your progress here of the stroke width, and then simply paint over that to erase this mask, this part here. So afterwards, then I go back to motion, and then I simply drag with my finger here, and also for the sky, so that it tells Pixel Motion that we want motion from here to here and from the sky from here to here. And then you can press the play button here, and you will now see the animation. Once you are happy with your animation, you can press on done here and then press on overlay if you want to overlay something. I like doing some overlays in case there's some sun or some lighting to make it even more animated. And here you have quite a bit to choose from. So in this case, I go for featured one, then press on this one. And by default, it will center this and make it full width. So you could pinch in or pinch out to make it bigger or smaller. And you can also just drag it somewhere else so that this, for example, acts like a sun, and I will put it up here. And in this case, what I forgot to do here, which I will do later on again, is press on this button here and then press on add, so that you will not override what you've just overlaid. So in this case, I will just put in some sparkles. And as you can see here again, we have this progress bar. In this case, this will regulate the opacity. So how much of this you can actually see of what you want to overlay. So as you can see here, you can see it pretty much. And then if I decrease the opacity, then you will see it less. Right, so here you can see again, I press on the down arrow here so that I can press on add here to add more overlays. Now I add back again the sun and I have the sparkles, and then I can press the down button here again, press on done, and then you press up here to share. It will open up this window, and here you can regulate what kind of resolution you want. In this case I have 1080p, and the duration, it could be 8 seconds. I think it goes up to 52 seconds. In this case I exported for 16 seconds. So then I press on export. It will then give you this small pop-up saying it's generating the video. Then it's gonna open up this next window, and then you just simply press on save, and it's gonna save it to your photos. And from there, from your photos, you can then share it to your laptop, where you can then use it for your video editing later on. Now that we have animated our images, the next step would be to generate the voices. So if you've already used HeyGen for your character talking, that would be one part, and the other part would be the narration, where we have the narrator talking out loud this text. And for this, most commonly, you can just use 11 Labs, which I'm about to show you right now. So once you have your story, you select whatever part you want to use. Usually I separate the text into multiple parts because, for example, somebody might be speaking and you want a different voice to use, or you just want a specific tone in the voice that you can accomplish with special characters. So for example, I usually go here and copy this, for example, before the colon. Then next I would choose this as next part. In this case, since the person is speaking and we're gonna use HeyGen, I will leave this out. Then the next sentence and so on. So you can paste it into 11 Labs. And if you have the setting of going for advanced settings, then I usually would go for that because it will give you more control of how the voice will sound later on. You could either do the text to speech here or speech to speech, which means you will speak and this will capture your emotion behind the voice, and then it will convert your voice to the output voice you want to use. So usually for narration, I would use Marcus. You can listen, for example, to him.
Let us always meet each other with smile, for the smile is the beginning of love.
Otherwise, you could just select other ones here. If you have 11 Labs Premium, you could also just generate your own voice. Then for the settings here, you should just play with different variables and just to see whether it fits how you want it to sound like. So I'm gonna leave this for the first try as default and then just press on generate speech.
A great Egyptian pharaoh summons his two young nephews, Chuma and Azur, and commissions them to a monumental task.
This sounds quite alright for this part, and then you would just press on here to download it. If you want to have more excitement or you want the speaker to speak differently, for example, you could put in, for example, an exclamation point or a question mark or ... or colon, and after changing the settings and regenerating, oftentimes the voice and the tonality changes. So sometimes you just have to play around a bit with it, but usually it works quite well. Then you just continue doing this for your whole story, and then you will have the voice part done. And now that we have generated our voices, we basically have all of our assets that we need. And now we just need to put them all together in order to create a movie out of this. For this, we are going to use a video editing software. You can choose whatever you like. You can use Premiere Pro, you can use DaVinci Resolve, you can use Final Cut Pro or CapCut. I'm going to use CapCut because you can use it completely for free and it's very straightforward. You can disregard this if you already have your video editor installed, but if you don't have CapCut yet and you want to use it, you simply go to CapCut.com and then you download it and install it. Just to give you a brief overview of the final assets I currently have. I have this image where you can see where it's here animated in the clouds and the lake here. Then I'm gonna use the character and this character. Then I have animated this with Pixelmotion with these little bubbles and the sun shining up there. And the same thing here where it's just a little bit zoomed in where the pharaoh is talking.
Build two massive pyramids as a tribute to Egypt.
And then this video where the pharaoh is talking from HeyGen. Then this palace with the sun shining, which I also did with Pixelmotion. Then where Asher is pushing the stone, where I have the small animation down there. Then these townspeople with some sun shining here, also created with Pixelmotion. Again with Pixelmotion, these clouds.
Chuma, why aren't you building your pyramid?
Then Asher talking, generated with HeyGen.
I am building a pyramid.
Chuma talking, generated with HeyGen. Then this moving the clouds and this sun shining up there, also generated with Pixelmotion. Then Chuma with his apparatus with transparent background. And then Asher working again with clouds moving in the background. Here this is just still image because I didn't see it would make sense to animate something in there. For this in the video editing later on we will just zoom in on the image while the narrator is talking. Then this video generated also with Pixelmotion where the coins are moving. Again this also generated with Pixelmotion with some big bubbles and the sun shining up there. Then this also created with Pixelmotion with these small bubbles flying around. Then this stone moving and these ropes also moving. This is also just a still image. And then for the gravestone, I simply have a sun shining. And then the last image is where we have this lake and the clouds and birds moving in the background. So once you've installed CapCut or whatever video editor you're using, simply press on Create Project and you will see all this blank stuff here. So what I usually do is select all of my assets and then just drag them in there, and then let's just drag the first thing in our timeline, and then we can also drag in our voices we generated with 11 Labs. And in case you haven't used a video editor before, you can use a couple of keyboard shortcuts in order to play. For example, to listen to what you currently have, or you could just simply press on the buttons here. Play might be different on a different video editor, but I assume if you don't use this particular video editor, you know what you're doing. But you can press the spacebar in order to play and pause the video. For example, when I press,
Great Egyptian pharaoh summons his two young nephews.
and you can rewind like this and then press play again, or you go somewhere else. And as you can see here on the timeline, this is the visual part, and down below you will always have the voices, music, sounds, whatever. And you can put other visual part on top of it, which will be shown above whatever is being shown here. For example, if I put Asher here, you will see him here. We can move him. You can also move him here by pressing up. You will see slowly he moves to the right. So if you hold this down with your mouse, you can also make this bigger and smaller. If you have a background that you don't like, for example, you can press on here, remove background, And CapCut has this nice feature that you can remove background. If you have a person in here, it will automatically remove this background if you check this. In this case, we don't need it here yet. I realized that if you use CapCut for the first time, all of these different options, they might seem a bit overwhelming in the beginning, but trust me, it's very easy. As I said, we have the timeline here, and since this is a video, usually for an image you can drag this as long or short as you want. For video you can make this shorter than the original length. In this case it's 8 seconds, and you can make this shorter by dragging it like that. Now listening back to our narration, if you listen to this.
A great Egyptian pharaoh summons his 2 young nephews, Chuma and Azur, and commissions them.
So in the beginning I just want to briefly show this, just for like a couple of seconds, and then directly have the pharaoh sitting there. So we drag this in there. So you can see here he's not yet holding his hand up. So I'm also just gonna make this brief, and I'm gonna drag the next part here. This is where he has his hand up. I'm actually gonna make this as long as the narration. You can also make the narration shorter, because here you can see when there is sound, and then here, for example, are pauses when you cannot see any of those bars. And a nice feature is here that when you drag it, it will snap. So as you can see here, this blue line will appear, it will snap. Also when you drag it up to the indicator where we're currently at. If you don't like this, or you just want to briefly turn it on and off, the snapping function, you can see it here. Turn off auto snapping, you can simply press N to turn it off or on, so to toggle on your keyboard. And this is now where the pharaoh is talking. So we're gonna drag in the video we made with HeyGen where the pharaoh is talking, and we want to overlay this over our pharaoh where he's sitting. So as you can see here, we're gonna remove the white background, or we can simply crop it. So we press on rectangle here and adjust it however we like. So make this a bit bigger here. Perfect. And now we just need to make sure that it fits onto the pharaoh. So we make this smaller. We can zoom in a bit here. As you can see here, it's not perfect yet. So we drag this a little bit down, make it smaller again. You can still see a little bit, it's not perfect yet. So we make it a bit bigger, So just make sure that it looks flawlessly. We're just gonna cut this part here till the end of our video, just like that. And now let's have a look.
Task.
Build 2 massive pyramids as a tribute to Egypt.
You can press on here to see it full screen.
Upon completion, I promise you kingship and riches for your remaining days.
So as you can see now, we basically merged 2 video files. This video file where the pharaoh is just sitting and we have those bubbles, and then our HeyGen animation where the pharaoh is talking. And now we have really nice animation of where the pharaoh is talking. One thing you can also do is you can see here when we transition from one image to the other image, it's like a bit jerky. So what you could do is just put in a transition. So you go here in transitions tab, and if you have the pro plan, you can use whatever you like. So you can see where this badge is. Otherwise you can use these where the pro badge is not there, and you will see a preview of what this looks like. So if I drag in the first one here, you drag it up there, and now let's see the transition. I'm just gonna drag this a little bit after the transition because it seemed a bit jerky that the animation of the character talking was already there before the whole image was loaded. So you have to do it depending on what transition you use. So in this case, I'm gonna remove that. I'll choose a different one. I'm gonna go for pull out, drag it there. Now let's have a look again. As you can see, sometimes if I use this timeline, it doesn't show. By the way, you can also use the arrow keys left and right to go frame by frame in the timeline. So if I press on the right arrow, you will see. As you can see here, this is exactly our transition, this frame. When I press on the right arrow, you will see that this is not perfect here. So if this was my final edit, I would make sure that this is perfect. Otherwise, let's continue. We can just crop this till the end here, because you can again also see here the sound where there's sound. We could make this a bit shorter till the end of the sound, and then also make this shorter. We go back to our imports and then to the next part of our story. By the way, when you drag something in, it will usually add it where the timeline marker is. So if we drag it somewhere here, it will still do it here. So that's why we're gonna put the timeline marker here and then drop in our next narration. Perfect. As you can see here, it got dragged here instead of there. If I was to put this marker here and wanted to drag it here, as you can see, it put it here. That's why when you drag something in, make sure the marker is where you want the imported file to be at. And so we have our narration, then let's put in our video. This is where the sun is shining. As you can see, let's briefly disable this flip by simply pressing V on your keyboard so that there is no sound currently. You can re-enable it again with V, but so that you just can see what this image animation is about. Is just basically the sun shining, and we want to have Chuma and Azura both appearing here because the narrator is talking about both of them. So he's firstly mentioning Chuma, so we're gonna pull in first Chuma. Let's drag him down there. Let's make him a bit bigger. And then let's also drag in Azura. Let's put him there. Let's make sure that everything is as long as the narration here. So this goes as well with Chuma and Azura. By the way, you can also zoom in on your timeline so that you can get an even closer grasp of everything you edit. For example, if you want to have Azura only appear once the narrator says Azura, you can zoom in and then look closely at what point here at the bars he's mentioning Azura. So in this case, it's here. So let's have him appear here. If you can zoom in with your mouse, then you can simply drag this bar here. It will do the exact same thing. And let's also move Azura down, make him a bit bigger. About the same height here, and then let's also have a nice effect of those moving in. For this we go to the animation tab up here, and here for him he's gonna slide in from the left to the right, and Azura is gonna slide from the right to the left. So for Chuma, let's press on slide right, and for Azura we're gonna go for slide left. So let's briefly disable the sound. Let's see. By the way, if you don't like this, you can go back, press on the character here, animation, and then you can also change how long the animation should be. So for example, it could be 0.2 seconds. So he will slide in quicker. Let's do the same thing for Azura, 0.2 seconds. Let's have a look at it again. And here we can also put back in our transition. Let's have a look. Perfect. Now with narration.
Chuma and Azura are both young, ambitious, and
so we have the sunlight in the background. The only thing I would like still to have is that the characters grow a bit bigger over time so that it's even more animated. In that case, we press firstly on Chuma, and usually on video editors you will have a functionality called keyframes, and this is simply to record the position and scale at a certain point in time, and then you change it later in time. For example, you make the character bigger and move him somewhere else, and you put another keyframe there, and the video editor will automatically make this image move or scale in that particular direction. So for example, when Chuma is already inside, you can see here the animation of sliding in is up to here. So we just go a little bit like that. And then we go here to video basic, and then on transform, we press on this button here, it adds a keyframe. So it will say, okay, at this point in time, Chuma has a scale of 155% and the position X and Y. And now later on at the end, we would like to have him bigger. For that, we press again on this keyframe, and now we make it bigger, and you could technically drag him somewhere else if you don't like it where he currently is. For example, you could move him to the right. And now let's have a look.
Chuma and Azura are both young, ambitious, and up for the challenge.
You can see how he's going taller and moving to the right. You can do the same thing with Azura. Press on him, add a keyframe, and then at the very end, add another keyframe. And here we're gonna make him bigger and move him to the left. Perfect. Now let's see.
Chuma and Azura are both young, ambitious, and up for the challenge.
Perfect. So we have the characters animating and the sunlight in the background. So you continue on doing this with all the parts of your characters and your images and your voices. And there's just one last step we still have to do before the movie is finished, which is adding sounds and music. For sounds, I want you to think of a simple kettle. Now imagine you had to do a video about this and do sounds for that. Most people would think, let's just look for kettle sounds and then we're done, right? No, there's actually quite a bit more to it. Of course, we need the centerpiece of the kettle, the sound of the kettle, and we need to find that sound that fits perfectly with whatever we're showing. And then you need to move out of this kettle into the whole scene. And then you have to think to yourself, what else could be here that would fit into the entire atmosphere? Normally, when you have a kettle, the kettle is cooking, as you can see here. So there's fire underneath it. So you might have to add fire sound. You could also have a sound effect representing when you turn on the fire, then the sizzling of the fire, then maybe some steam coming off the kettle. And then if you move even further out of the scene, you're probably in the kitchen, right? As you can see here. That's why I chose this particular image. And for example, if you're in a kitchen in a restaurant, you will have people talking, or you would have other cooking sounds. So you also have to think about that. So you have to think about, what does a kitchen sound like? This is the framework I want you to have in your mind whenever you're choosing sounds for any particular scene, because this will make this movie even more alive, and it will even more capture your viewers' attention. They will be completely completely immersed in it. And that's exactly what we want. So in order to have specific sound effects, you can simply Google them and you will easily find free ones that you can use. Also, on top of sound effects, we will also need music. And for music, you can easily use this website, freesound.org. You can put in specific keywords you want to have, for example, suspense, and then you will have different kinds of sounds that you can use. Of course, you have to then have a look at the license and what to do in order to use this particular sound, but otherwise you can just use it completely for free. So if we listen, for example, to the first sound here, if we like it, we press on it and then we can download it here. Otherwise, there's another tool which you usually have to pay a little bit, but it's used very commonly, and this is called epidemicsound.com. And in here you have sound effects and music, and the music is pretty great. That's why a lot of people use this. So you can see here on the pricing page, it costs like 11 euros per month if you don't like the options of freesound.org. So if you have a look at my complete timeline, this is what it looks like. I have all the narrations here, all the video animations, some images. Here I have a continuous music going on, and it was not long enough, so I just copied some of the part here, cut it however I liked it, and then just dragged it here. By the way, if you want to copy something, you can hold down Alt or Option on your Mac and then just drag it, and it will copy it. Release your mouse before you release the Alt key, otherwise it will not copy. And then also you can see these buttons here. It will fade out the music if you drag this from the right to the left. So if you drag this further here, it will slowly turn down the music the last 10 seconds. In this case, let me undo this. And you can see here me putting in some different sounds. For example, there are some people, so I put in a crowd. For the gravestone, I put in some sad music. Then here for the last animation, there's a lake, so I put in sea waves as a sound. So this is basically it. One last thing is it's nice to have these texts down here, as you can see here. So for that, you can simply go to the text tab here and then go to auto captions and then choose the spoken language of your narration and whatever the people are talking. And then you can press on generate and it will automatically generate all these captions here. Most of the time, I'd say about 90 to 95% is correct. And sometimes you have to go in here and press on it, and if the person, for example, says the only conditions instead of condition, then you would just go in here and change it conditions. But this was correct in this case, so let me undo that. And here you can see also what the text usually looks like. In my case, I have the white color and I have some outline here. If you scroll further down, here the stroke and then the thickness. So if you see, let me zoom in a little bit so you can more easily see this. So if I increase the thickness, you can see here, that's how you do that. You can also use pre-made templates from CapCut. So the text would be looking like this, or with black background, or like with colored text and so on, whatever you like. And you can see here, if you have selected a text, it will show this orange bar where it says to which part it holds onto of a specific text that is being set. Also, you see this whole thing here, it goes all the way through. So I just put in our YouTube banner here. You don't have to do that, of course. You can also put in something else, but that's basically it. Now we have our complete timeline, and now all we have to do is export our video. So we press on export up there, you give it a name, you export it to somewhere, and then you can say the resolution here, 1080p or whatever format and so on. Usually those default ones are okay, except for resolution I would probably put it to 1080p, and then export. You can also see this about size and how long it's gonna be, and this is basically it. Now before I show you the end result, please leave a like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, of course, write them down below in the comments and I will try to answer them.
A great Egyptian pharaoh summons his two young nephews, Chuma and Azur, and commissions them to a monumental task.
Build 2 massive pyramids as a tribute to Egypt. Upon completion, I promise you kingship and riches for your remaining days. The only condition is that you must construct it without the help of anyone else.
Chuma and Azur are both young, ambitious, and up for the challenge. Azur gets to work immediately. He drags heavy stones into a square formation and in a few months completes the foundation of the pyramid. Townspeople cheer him on and commend his hard work. But Azur is confused. When he looks over to where Chuma's pyramid is supposed to be, he only sees an empty lot. He goes to visit Chuma only to find him working on a twisted apparatus that resembles some kind of a human torture device. Azur says,
Chuma, why aren't you building your pyramid? The pharaoh might take this as disrespect and kill you.
Chuma smiles back quietly and says,
I am building a pyramid. Leave me alone. your short-sightedness and thirst for wealth have clouded your vision. You build your pyramid, and I will build mine.
Another year passes, and Azur is now building the second level of the pyramid, where he encounters a problem. As the pyramid gets taller, it is becoming increasingly difficult to carry the stones up. He hires Bennu, a local strongman, to teach him to be stronger. As the pyramid gets taller, his toil gets harder. He continues to pay Bennu for his services, and Azur's only consolation is that his pyramid is higher than his brother Chuma's, which is still non-existent. One day, while Azur hauls a heavy stone up his pyramid, he hears a loud commotion erupting from the town square. He rushes over to see what is going on. Surrounded by a cheering crowd, Chuma is commandeering a 25-foot contraption, a towering machine built from a twisted maze of gantries, wheels, and levers. Within minutes, Chuma's strange machine starts moving heavy stones and begins to lay the foundation of his pyramid. The machine effortlessly lifts the stones and softly places them side by side into place. Using his machine, Chuma completes the base of the pyramid in a week, and the second level within a month. Azur was destroyed, but instead of building his own machine, he buckles down and trains even harder with Bennu, promising himself that he will not let Chuma beat him. After a few years, Azur dies from physical exhaustion, leaving just 2 more levels to go to complete the pyramid. Using his machine, Chuma retires 40 years early and uses his riches and free time to become Egypt's greatest scholar and accomplished inventor. He is buried in the same pyramid that he built.